His heart stopped when he opened the door. The room was dimly lit, but there was enough light for him to see her standing by the window, tears streaming down her face. She was holding something in her hands, a small, framed photo that she quickly hid behind her back when she heard the door open. For a moment they just stared at each other, both frozen in shock. This wasn't his room. And clearly she hadn't been expecting anyone to walk in. The billionaire CEO stood there, keycard still in hand, unsure whether to back away slowly or apologize for the intrusion. But something about her eyes, red and puffy from crying, made him pause. In all his years of business dealings, of hard negotiations and corporate takeovers, he had never felt so completely off balance. "I'm sorry," he finally managed to say. "I think I got the wrong room." Jack Wilson wasn't used to making mistakes. As the CEO of Wilson Tech Enterprises, one of the largest technology companies in the world, precision was part of his daily life. Numbers, data, decisions, everything had to be exact. But here he was, standing in a stranger's hotel room at the Silver Sands Resort, where he'd come to unwind after closing a major business deal. The woman quickly wiped her tears and straightened her posture. "Room 507, right?" she asked, her voice steadier than her hands. "No, 508. I'm across the hall," Jack replied, taking a step back. "The keycard worked, so I just assumed." "They sometimes program them wrong at the front desk," she said, attempting a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Happens more often than you'd think." Jack nodded, backing toward the door. "Again, I'm really sorry for barging in. It's fine," she cut him off. "Just a mix-up." As he closed the door behind him, Jack couldn't shake the image of her face, the sadness in her eyes, the way she tried to hide whatever she was looking at. It wasn't his business. He had meetings tomorrow, calls to make, a company to run. And yet, as he entered his actual room across the hall, he found himself wondering what could make someone look so heartbroken in a place meant for relaxation and enjoyment. The next morning, Jack woke early as usual. 5 o'clock, no alarm needed. His body was programmed after years of early mornings. He changed into his running clothes and headed down to the beach. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The sand was cool beneath his feet, and for the first time in months, Jack felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. And then he saw her, the woman from room 507, sitting alone at the edge of the water. She was wearing a light sweater despite the warm morning, hugging her knees to her chest as she stared out at the waves. Jack hesitated. He could easily turn and run in the other direction. That would be the sensible thing to do. But instead, his feet carried him toward her. "Is this spot taken?" he asked, gesturing to the sand beside her. She looked up, surprise registering on her face when she recognized him. "The man with the wrong key," she said with a small smile. "Come to break into more rooms?" "I was thinking of trying the presidential suite next," Jack replied, relieved when she laughed softly. "Mind if I join you?" She shrugged and moved over slightly, making room for him on the sand. Free beach. They sat in silence for a while, watching as the sun climbed higher in the sky. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that Jack rarely experienced in his high-pressure world of constant demands and expectations. "I'm Jack, by the way," he finally said. "Jack Wilson." "Ellie Parker," she replied, not looking at him. "Though I'm guessing you'd rather be known as the CEO of Wilson Tech." Jack turned to her, surprised. "You know who I am?" Ellie gave him a sideways glance. "Your face was on the cover of Business Today last month. The man revolutionizing the tech industry. Hard to miss. And here I thought I could be anonymous for a few days," Jack said with a sigh. "Is that why you're here? To be anonymous?" Jack dug his feet into the sand, considering her question. "Partly. Mostly I'm here because my assistant insisted I take a break before and I quote, work myself into an early grave." Sounds like a smart assistant. She is. Too smart sometimes. "What about you? Why Silver Sands Resort?" Ellie was quiet for so long that Jack thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "I made a promise to someone. That I'd come here one day." The way she said it, Jack knew there was more to the story, much more. But he also knew it wasn't his place to push. Whatever had made her cry last night, whatever photo she'd been holding, it was clearly something deeply personal. "Well," he said, standing up and brushing sand from his shorts, "I should get back to my run. It was nice meeting you properly, Ellie Parker." She looked up at him, shielding her eyes from the sun. "You too, Jack Wilson. Enjoy your anonymity while it lasts." As Jack jogged away, he found himself looking back over his shoulder. Ellie had returned to staring out at the ocean, her figure small against the vastness of the water. He couldn't explain why, but something about her pulled at him, a mystery he couldn't solve with data or business strategies. Later that day, as Jack sat by the pool reviewing quarterly reports on his tablet, so much for a real break, he spotted Ellie again. She was reading a book at a table near the bar, occasionally sipping from a tall glass of something fruity. Without giving himself time to reconsider, Jack closed his reports and walked over. "Let me guess," he said, stopping beside her table. "Resort mystery novel?" Ellie looked up, marking her place with her finger. "Close. Resort ghost story. Apparently, this place is haunted by the spirit of a jilted bride who drowned herself in the ocean." "Cheerful vacation reading," Jack commented, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "May I?" She hesitated for a moment before nodding. Jack sat down, signaling to a passing waiter for a drink. "So, Mr. CO," Ellie said, closing her book, "aren't you supposed to be in important meetings or buying small countries or whatever it is billionaires do?" Jack laughed. "I'm taking a forced vacation. Doctor's orders. And my assistants. And my boards." Sounds like an intervention. It basically was. They ganged up on me and threatened to lock me out of the company servers if I didn't take some time off. "And yet," Ellie pointed to his tablet, "you're still working." Jack had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. Old habits. As they continued talking, Jack found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. Ellie was sharp, witty, and refreshingly unimpressed by his status. She didn't ask about his company or his wealth. Instead, they talked about books they'd read, places they'd traveled, and the little observations about life that most people were too busy to notice. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples, Jack realized he'd spent the entire afternoon just talking. No emails. No calls. No reports. Just conversation with a woman who seemed to see past all his usual defenses. "I should go get ready for dinner," Ellie finally said, gathering her things. "Would you like to have dinner together?" Jack asked, surprising himself with the invitation. "The seafood restaurant here is supposed to be excellent." Something flickered across Ellie's face, hesitation, maybe even a hint of the sadness he'd seen last night. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said softly. "Just dinner," Jack clarified. "As friends?" Ellie looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide something important. Finally she nodded. "Okay, just dinner. Meet you there at 8? 8 it is." As Jack watched her walk away, he realized he was looking forward to a dinner more than he had any business meeting or corporate event in recent memory. And that thought was both exciting and terrifying for a man who had built his life around work and nothing else. The seafood restaurant at Silver Sands Resort was everything the reviews had promised. Elegant without being stuffy, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view of the moonlit ocean. Jack arrived early, asking for a quiet table away from the other diners. He wanted to be able to talk without worrying about being recognized or overheard. When Ellie walked in at exactly 8 o'clock, Jack felt his breath catch slightly. She was wearing a simple blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked beautiful, but it was more than that. There was a quiet grace about her that drew the eye. "You clean up nice, CO," she said as she sat down across from him. "I almost didn't recognize you without a tablet in your hand." Jack smiled. "I left it in the room. Locked in the safe actually, so I wouldn't be tempted." Impressive willpower. More like self-preservation. If my assistant found out I was working during dinner, she'd extend my forced vacation by another week. Their conversation flowed easily as they ordered drinks and appetizers. Jack found himself talking about his childhood. Growing up in a small town, working at his father's hardware store, dreaming of building something bigger. He rarely shared these stories with anyone, especially not someone he'd just met. But there was something about Ellie that made it feel natural. "So how does a small-town hardware store kid become a tech billionaire?" Ellie asked, sipping her wine. "Luck. Hard work. Being in the right place at the right time," Jack replied. "I developed a security software program in college that caught the attention of some investors. One thing led to another, and suddenly I was running a company." "You make it sound so simple." "The beginning was. It's everything that came after that got complicated." Jack paused, realizing he'd been talking about himself for too long. "But enough about me. What about you? What do you do when you're not making mysterious promises to visit beach resorts?" A shadow crossed Ellie's face, so briefly that Jack might have imagined it. "I'm a photographer," she said. "Mostly freelance work for magazines and websites." "That sounds fascinating. What kind of photography?" "Nature, landscapes, that sort of thing." places rather than people. She took another sip of wine. I like capturing the beauty of spaces that might otherwise go unnoticed. I'd love to see your work sometime, Jack said. Ellie nodded but didn't offer to show him any photos. Instead, she changed the subject. So how long are you staying at Silver Sands? A week. Unless my assistant decides I need more time to decompress, as she puts it. Jack smiled. What about you? Just until tomorrow, Ellie replied, looking down at her plate. It was only meant to be a short visit. Jack felt a strange disappointment at her words. That's too bad. I was hoping we might have more time to talk. Ellie met his eyes, her expression unreadable. Jack, I should probably explain something. I'm not. But before she could finish, their server arrived with their main courses, momentarily interrupting the conversation. By the time they were alone again, the moment had passed, and Ellie was asking him about his favorite places to travel. As dinner progressed, Jack found himself increasingly intrigued by this woman who seemed both open and mysterious at the same time. She spoke passionately about photography, about capturing the perfect light, about the places she traveled. But whenever the conversation turned too personal, she gently steered it elsewhere. After dinner, they walked along the moonlit beach, their shoes dangling from their hands as they felt the cool sand between their toes. The night was warm, with a gentle breeze carrying the salt scent of the ocean. Thank you for dinner, Ellie said as they walked. It was lovely. Thank you for the company, Jack replied. It's been a long time since I've had a conversation that didn't involve quarterly projections or market strategies. Ellie laughed softly. That sounds terribly boring. It is, sometimes. But it's also what I built my life around. They stopped walking, turning to face the water. The moon cast a silver path across the waves, leading out to the horizon. Can I ask you something, Ellie? Jack said after a moment of comfortable silence. You can ask. I might not answer. Fair enough. Jack turned to look at her profile in the moonlight. That night, when I accidentally came into your room, what were you looking at? The photo you were holding? Ellie was quiet for so long that Jack thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. It was a picture of me and my husband. The word hung in the air between them. Husband. Jack felt a strange tightness in his chest. You're married? I was, Ellie replied, still looking out at the water. David died 2 years ago. Cancer. I'm so sorry, Jack said, feeling inadequate in the face of her loss. We had plans to come here to Silver Sands, Ellie continued. It was going to be our 5th anniversary trip. But he got sick and... She took a deep breath. Before he died, he made me promise I'd still come. Eventually. When I was ready. Jack's heart ached for her. And are you? Ready? Ellie turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. I thought I was. But being here, seeing all the couples, all the happiness, it's harder than I expected. Without thinking, Jack reached out and took her hand. To his surprise, she didn't pull away. They stood like that for a while, hand in hand, looking out at the ocean. No words seemed necessary or adequate. When they finally turned to walk back to the resort, Jack didn't let go of her hand and Ellie didn't ask him to. It was a small connection, but in that moment, it felt like the most important one in the world. As they reached the hotel entrance, Ellie gently pulled her hand away. Good night, Jack, she said softly. Thank you for understanding. Ellie, Jack said as she turned to go. I know you're leaving tomorrow, but would you consider staying longer? Just a day or two. She looked at him, a mixture of emotions crossing her face. Why? It was a simple question, but Jack knew his answer mattered. Because talking with you today made me feel more alive than I have in years. And I'm not ready for that to end. Ellie's expression softened. I'll think about it, she said. Good night, Jack. As she walked away, Jack stood in the hotel lobby, watching until she disappeared into the elevator. He knew he should go to his own room, get some sleep, maybe even check those reports he'd been neglecting. But all he could think about was Ellie, her smile, her sadness, and the possibility that she might stay. Jack woke before dawn, his mind still full of thoughts of Ellie. Would she decide to stay? Or would she leave as planned, disappearing from his life as suddenly as she had entered it? He tried to tell himself that it shouldn't matter so much. After all, they'd only just met. But something about her had touched him deeply, awakening feelings he'd long since buried beneath work and responsibility. Unable to sleep, he dressed quickly and headed down to the beach for an early morning run. The sky was just beginning to lighten, the stars fading as the first hints of sunrise appeared on the horizon. The beach was empty except for a few early morning walkers in the distance. As Jack ran, letting the rhythm of his footsteps and the sound of the waves clear his mind, he spotted a familiar figure sitting on the sand, Ellie in the same spot as yesterday watching the sunrise. His heart quickened, and not just from the exertion of running. He slowed as he approached, not wanting to startle her. "Good morning," he said softly. Ellie turned, a small smile appearing when she saw him. "Morning, running man. Mind if I join you again?" She gestured to the sand beside her, and Jack sat down, catching his breath. They were quiet for a moment, watching as the sun began to peek above the water, painting the sky in vibrant colors. "I've decided to stay," Ellie said suddenly, still looking at the horizon. "Just for a few more days." Jack tried to contain his smile. "What changed your mind?" She turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. "Something David used to say. That life is for the living, and that when he was gone he wanted me to keep living. Really living, not just going through the motions." "He sounds like he was a wise man." "He was." Ellie looked back at the ocean. "After he died I threw myself into work. Traveled constantly, took any assignment that would keep me busy and distracted. I told myself I was honoring his wish for me to keep living, but I wasn't, not really. I was just avoiding feeling anything." Jack understood that all too well. Wasn't that exactly what he'd done after his own loss? Buried himself in work until Wilson Tech became his whole identity? "Coming here was supposed to be about saying goodbye," Ellie continued. "About fulfilling my promise to him and then moving on. But now I'm thinking maybe it's also about saying hello to whatever comes next." The way she looked at him when she said those last words made Jack's heart skip a beat. "I'm glad you're staying," he said simply. Ellie smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "So, what does one do at a fancy resort when they're not working themselves to death?" Jack laughed. "I have absolutely no idea. This whole relaxation thing is new territory for me." "Well then," Ellie said, standing up and brushing sand from her clothes, "I guess we'll have to figure it out together." She held out her hand to help him up, and when Jack took it, he felt a spark of connection that went beyond the physical touch. As they walked back toward the resort, making plans for the day ahead, Jack realized he was smiling, really smiling, for the first time in longer than he could remember. They spent the day doing things that Jack would normally never make time for, snorkeling in the clear blue waters where Ellie pointed out colorful fish and coral formations, lounging by the pool with ridiculous tropical drinks, even trying their hand at a pottery class offered by the resort, where they both failed spectacularly at creating anything remotely resembling the bowls they were supposed to be making. "I think mine looks like a mutant ashtray," Jack said, examining his lopsided creation. Ellie laughed, holding up her own misshapen bowl. "Mine's not much better. So much for having artistic hands as a photographer. I'll have you know I'm considered quite skilled at reading spreadsheets," Jack replied with mock seriousness. A true Renaissance man. As they left the pottery studio, their failed creations left behind to be fired, for evidence of our incompetence, as Ellie put it, Jack felt lighter than he had in years. He'd spent the entire day without checking his phone or tablet, without thinking about work or responsibilities. Instead, he'd been fully present, enjoying each moment with a woman who seemed to understand him in ways that people who'd known him for years never had. That evening they had dinner at a small, casual restaurant on the beach, sitting at a table with their feet in the sand as they ate fresh fish and watched the sunset. The conversation flowed easily between them, touching on everything from favorite books to childhood memories to dreams they'd once had but had set aside. "I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid," Jack admitted. "Had my whole room decorated with stars and planets. Read every book about space I could get my hands on." "What happened to that dream?" Ellie asked, genuinely curious. Jack shrugged. "Life, I guess. My dad got sick when I was in high school. The family needed money more than they needed an astronaut. So I focused on computers instead, something practical that could pay the bills." "Do you regret it? Not chasing that dream?" It was a question Jack had never really allowed himself to consider. "I don't know. I like what I've built with Wilson Tech. We're doing good work, creating products that help people. But sometimes I look up at the stars and wonder." Ellie nodded, understanding in her eyes. "David and I had all these plans. Places we wanted to see, things we wanted to do. When he got sick we made a list, a bucket list I guess you could call it. We thought we'd have time even with the diagnosis. But things happened faster than the doctors predicted." "The resort was on that list?" "It was. Along with seeing the northern lights, learning to sail, visiting every continent." Ellie's voice trailed off. "After he died I couldn't look at the list for a long time. It hurt too much." "And now?" Jack asked gently. "Now I'm thinking maybe I should dust it off. Not just for him but for me too. She looked at Jack, her expression open and vulnerable. Life is short, you know? Too short to spend it all working or grieving or being afraid to feel things. The way she said it, so simple so true, struck Jack deeply. Wasn't that exactly what he'd been doing for years? Working endlessly, avoiding real connections, keeping himself numb to both pain and joy? As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jack and Ellie walked along the shore, talking about everything and nothing. When they reached a quiet, secluded stretch of beach, they sat on the sand, looking up at the vast expanse of stars above them. There, Jack said, pointing. That's Orion. The hunter. Those 3 stars in a row are his belt. Ellie leaned closer to follow his pointing finger. I can see it. What's that bright one there? That's Betelgeuse. It's a red supergiant star, one of the largest we can see with the naked eye. Look at you, still the space nerd after all these years, Ellie teased gently. Jack laughed. Some dreams don't completely die, I guess. They just hibernate. They fell silent, comfortable in each other's presence as they watched the stars. After a while, Ellie spoke again, her voice soft. Jack, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Have you ever been married? Or close to it? The question caught him off guard, but Jack found himself wanting to answer honestly. I was engaged once, a long time ago. Her name was Claire. We were college sweethearts. What happened? Jack took a deep breath, looking up at the stars rather than at Ellie. She died. Car accident. We were both 22, about to graduate. He felt Ellie's hand find his in the darkness. I'm so sorry, Jack. It was a long time ago, he said, though even as he spoke the words, he knew that time hadn't healed that wound as much as he pretended. After it happened, I threw myself into work. Building the company became my whole life. Safer that way, I guess. Safer. Than loving someone. Than risking that kind of loss again. Ellie squeezed his hand. I understand that. After David, I swore I'd never put myself in that position again. Never be that vulnerable. They sat in silence for a moment, both lost in memories of loves they'd lost. Then Ellie turned to face him. But Jack, I'm starting to think that's no way to honor the people we've loved and lost. Closing ourselves off, refusing to feel anything, that's not what they would want for us. Her words echoed what she'd said earlier about David wanting her to keep living. And Jack knew with sudden clarity that Claire would have felt the same way. She wouldn't have wanted him to spend his life alone, buried in work, afraid to connect with anyone. You're right, he said softly. It's just hard to open that door again. I know. Ellie's voice was equally soft. Believe me, I know. In the starlight, Jack could see the mixture of emotions on her face. Understanding, sadness, but also something else. Hope, perhaps. Or possibility. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Jack leaned closer. When she didn't move back, he gently touched her face, his thumb brushing lightly across her cheek. And then, as naturally as breathing, they were kissing. A soft, tentative kiss that held both their pasts and the possibility of a future. When they finally pulled apart, Ellie's eyes were shining with unshed tears. I wasn't expecting this, she whispered. Not here. Not now. Not you. Jack smiled, his heart feeling fuller than it had in years. Neither was I. But I'm glad it happened. Ellie nodded, resting her forehead against his. Me too. As they walked back to the resort, hand in hand under the starlit sky, Jack knew that something fundamental had shifted. He'd come to Silver Sands looking for rest, not transformation. But in accidentally entering the wrong room, he might have found his way to exactly where he was supposed to be. The next morning, Jack woke to a gentle knocking at his door. Confused, he hadn't ordered room service. He pulled on a t-shirt and opened the door to find Ellie standing there, already dressed in hiking clothes, a wide-brimmed hat in her hands. Good morning, sleepyhead, she said with a bright smile. Get dressed. We're going on an adventure. Jack blinked, still not fully awake. What time is it? 7:30. I let you sleep in. Her eyes twinkled with mischief. For a CEO, you're surprisingly lazy on vacation. Give me 5 minutes, Jack said, unable to resist her enthusiasm. True to his word, Jack was dressed and ready in record time. Ellie led him to a waiting jeep in front of the resort, tossing him the keys with a grin. You're driving. I'm navigating. Where are we going? Jack asked as he started the engine. Ellie pulled out a map, an actual paper map, not a phone. There's a hidden waterfall about an hour from here. Not many tourists know about it. The resort concierge told me about it when I mentioned I'm a photographer. Jack raised an eyebrow. And you trust my driving on unfamiliar roads? I trust that a man who built a billion-dollar company can follow basic directions, Ellie replied with a laugh. Besides, the journey is half the fun. She was right. The drive took them through small coastal villages, past colorful markets and fields of swaying palms. Ellie pointed out interesting sights along the way, often asking Jack to stop so she could take a quick photograph. Her excitement was contagious, and Jack found himself enjoying the simple pleasure of discovery. Eventually, the paved road gave way to a dirt track, and Ellie directed them to park near a small, unmarked trailhead. We walk from here, she said, grabbing a backpack from the back seat. It's about a 20-minute hike. I packed water and snacks. The trail wound through dense tropical forest, the air thick with humidity and the scent of earth and growing things. Jack followed Ellie, watching as she occasionally stopped to photograph a vibrant flower or an unusual insect. Her passion for capturing beauty was evident in every careful frame she composed. You really love this, don't you? Jack asked during one such stop. Ellie looked up from her camera, her face glowing with happiness. Photography? Yes. It's how I make sense of the world. Finding beauty in unexpected places, preserving moments that might otherwise be forgotten. It feels important, somehow. Jack nodded, understanding completely. That's how I feel about my work. At its best, anyway. Creating something that matters. They continued walking, the sound of rushing water growing louder until the trail suddenly opened up to reveal a spectacular sight. A waterfall cascading down moss-covered rocks into a clear pool below, surrounded by lush vegetation and flowers in every color imaginable. Wow, was all Jack could say, taking in the pristine beauty of the place. Ellie was already moving around the clearing, finding different angles to photograph the waterfall. Jack sat on a large rock, content to watch her work. There was something mesmerizing about seeing her in her element, focused, passionate, alive with creative energy. After she'd taken dozens of photos, Ellie joined him on the rock, setting her camera aside carefully. Thank you for bringing me here, Jack said, taking her hand. It's incredible. I wanted to share something special with you, Ellie replied. Something that would remind you there's a whole world beyond boardrooms and business deals. Message received, Jack said with a smile. Though I'm beginning to think my assistant conspired with the universe when she booked me at Silver Sands. Oh. She's been telling me for years that I need to get a life outside of work. Her exact words, many times over. Jack shook his head, amused. If she knew I'd accidentally wandered into the wrong room and met you, she'd never let me hear the end of it. Ellie laughed, the sound blending with the rushing water. The wrong room that turned out to be exactly the right one. They spent the morning at the waterfall, swimming in the cool water of the pool, drying off in the sun, and sharing the snacks Ellie had packed. It was simple and perfect. A moment out of time that Jack knew he would remember for years to come. As they hiked back to the car later, Ellie turned to Jack with a thoughtful expression. Can I ask you something? Anything. When you go back to your real life, the company, the responsibilities, all of it, what will you take from this? From us meeting? It was a profound question, one that made Jack pause on the trail. I think I'll take the reminder that life isn't meant to be all work. That connecting with someone, really connecting, matters more than all the success and money in the world. Ellie's smile was both sweet and a little sad. Good answer, CO. What about you? Jack asked. What will you take from this? Ellie looked ahead, her expression pensive. The knowledge that my heart isn't completely broken. That it's still capable of feeling something unexpected. On the drive back to the resort, they were quieter, both lost in thoughts about what this connection between them meant and where it might lead. Jack couldn't ignore the fact that in just a few days, he would return to his company and his life in the city. And Ellie? She had her own life, her photography, her travels. But as he drove, with Ellie sitting beside him pointing out a family of monkeys in the trees, Jack found himself unwilling to worry about the future. For now, he would simply enjoy these moments, this unexpected gift of connection that had come from entering the wrong hotel room. That evening, they dined at an elegant restaurant in the nearby town, sitting at a table on a terrace overlooking the harbor. Lanterns hung from trees, casting a warm glow over the diners, and a gentle sea breeze carried the scent of flowers and salt water. I've been thinking, Jack said as they enjoyed their meal, about what you said earlier about David's bucket list. Ellie looked up, curious. What about it? I was wondering if you'd tell me more about it. The places you wanted to go, the things you wanted to do. For a moment, Jack worried he'd overstepped, bringing up a painful subject. But then Ellie's expression softened. We wanted to see the aurora borealis. That was at the top of the list. David was fascinated by it, this natural light show in the sky. We planned to go to Iceland or Norway to see it. That sounds amazing, Jack said. What else? Learning to sail. David grew up near the ocean and always loved boats. We talked about taking sailing lessons, maybe even buying a small boat someday. Ellie smiled at the memory. He wanted to sail along the coast, stopping at little harbors and towns along the way. As Ellie continued to share their dreams, visiting Machu Picchu, seeing the cherry blossoms in Japan, learning to make authentic Italian pasta from a grandmother in Tuscany, Jack found himself imagining these experiences, not just for Ellie and David but for Ellie and himself. It was a surprising thought, one that both excited and frightened him. Do you still want to do these things? He asked when she finished. Ellie considered the question. I think I do. Not out of obligation to David, but because they're beautiful experiences worth having. She looked at Jack directly. Life's too short not to reach for the things that bring you joy. I've been thinking the same thing, Jack admitted, about how much of life I've missed while building my company. Don't get me wrong, I'm proud of what I've created. But at what cost? It's never too late to change course, Ellie said softly. No, it isn't, Jack agreed, reaching across the table to take her hand. Ellie, I know we've only known each other for a few days, but I feel like... He was interrupted by the buzzing of his phone in his pocket. Jack ignored it, continuing to look at Ellie. But then it buzzed again. And again. With an apologetic glance, Jack pulled out his phone. I'm sorry, I should check this. I told my assistant to only contact me for emergencies. Ellie nodded, understanding in her eyes. Of course. Jack looked at the screen, his expression shifting from annoyance to concern. It's the company. There's an issue with our new security system launch. He looked up at Ellie, clearly torn. I'm sorry, I need to make a call. Go ahead, Ellie said. I don't mind. Jack stepped away from the table, moving to a quiet corner of the terrace. Ellie watched him as he spoke on the phone, his posture changing subtly as he slipped back into CEO mode. Back straight, voice firm, decisiveness in every gesture. It was fascinating to see this other side of him, the powerful businessman who commanded respect and made million-dollar decisions without hesitation. When he returned to the table 10 minutes later, his expression was troubled. I'm so sorry about that. Is everything okay? Ellie asked. Jack sighed. Yes and no. We're launching a major new product next week, and there's been a security vulnerability discovered at the last minute. My team is handling it, but... He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. But they need you, Ellie finished for him. They're asking me to come back early. Jack looked genuinely distressed. Ellie, I don't want to leave. Not yet. Not when we've just... Ellie reached across the table, placing her hand over his. Jack, it's okay. I understand. Your company needs you. I could say no, Jack said, though they both knew he wouldn't. Tell them to handle it without me. Could you really? Without worrying? Without checking your phone every 5 minutes? Ellie's smile was gentle, not accusatory. Jack, your company is part of who you are. I wouldn't ask you to ignore that. Jack looked at her, gratitude and something deeper in his eyes. You're amazing, you know that? Most people would be upset. I'm not most people, Ellie replied with a small smile. They finished their dinner talking about lighter subjects, carefully avoiding the reality that Jack would be leaving in the morning. But as they walked back to the resort along the moonlit beach, the unspoken hung between them like a physical presence. When do you have to leave? Ellie finally asked as they reached the hotel. There's a flight at 10 tomorrow morning, Jack replied, his voice heavy with regret. Ellie nodded, looking out at the ocean rather than at him. Well, we still have tonight. The simple words held so much meaning. Jack gently turned her face toward his, searching her eyes. Ellie, I don't want this to be goodbye. I know we live different lives, but... Ellie prompted when he hesitated. But I don't want to go back to a life where you're not in it, Jack finished, the words coming straight from his heart. Ellie's eyes shimmered with emotion. I don't want that either. Jack pulled her close, their lips meeting in a kiss that expressed everything they couldn't put into words. The surprise of finding connection when they least expected it, the joy of shared moments, and the bittersweet knowledge that their time together was coming to an end. When they finally parted, Ellie took Jack's hand. Come with me, she said softly, leading him toward her room. That night, they shared not just their bodies but their hopes, their fears, their dreams. In the quiet darkness, with only the sound of the waves outside, they spoke of possibilities, of Jack taking more time away from work, of Ellie perhaps bringing her photography to the city where he lived, of finding ways to bridge the gap between their separate lives. And in the early hours of the morning, as Ellie lay sleeping beside him, Jack made a decision that would change everything. The sunrise painted the room in soft golds and pinks as Jack carefully slipped out of bed, trying not to wake Ellie. He moved quietly to the balcony, phone in hand, and dialed a familiar number. Despite the early hour, his assistant answered on the second ring. "Sarah, it's me," Jack said softly. "I need you to make some changes." As he outlined his plan, Jack watched the ocean, where the first rays of sun created a glittering path across the water. This wasn't like him. He never made impulsive decisions, especially not about the company. Every move was calculated, considered from all angles. But right now, logic and business strategy weren't driving him. Something else was, something that felt remarkably like hope. When he ended the call, Jack turned to find Ellie standing in the doorway of the balcony, wrapped in a sheet, her hair tousled from sleep. "Hey," she said softly. "Everything okay?" Jack smiled, crossing to her and taking her in his arms. "Better than okay." Ellie studied his face, her photographer's eye missing nothing. "You look different. What happened?" "I just had a conversation with my assistant," Jack replied. "I'm not going back today." Ellie's eyes widened. "But your company, the security issue, will be handled by my very competent team," Jack finished. "With me on video conference as needed. I'm staying, Ellie, for the rest of the week as planned." "Jack," Ellie began, concern in her voice. "I don't want you to neglect your responsibilities because of me." "I'm not," Jack assured her. "I'm just reprioritizing. For once in my life, I'm choosing something other than work. Someone other than work." The way he looked at her when he said someone made Ellie's heart skip. But there was still hesitation in her eyes. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Jack said, and he meant it. "Ellie, meeting you, it's like waking up after a long sleep. I don't want to go back to sleepwalking through my life." Ellie's expression softened, a mixture of joy and wonder crossing her face. "What happens after this week?" she asked, the practical question that hung between them. "I don't know exactly," Jack admitted. "But I know I want to find out. With you." It was enough for now. They spent the morning in a bubble of happiness, ordering room service breakfast and eating on the balcony as they watched the resort come to life below them. Jack took a brief video call with his team, giving them direction on the security issue while Ellie discreetly showered and dressed. Later, as they walked hand in hand along the beach, Jack outlined what he'd done. "I've put my COO in charge temporarily," he explained. "She's more than capable. I'll check in daily but from a distance. And I've asked Sarah to start reorganizing my schedule going forward." "What does that mean?" Ellie asked. "It means I'm making space in my life," Jack replied. "For things that matter. For you if you want that." Ellie stopped walking, turning to face him. "Jack, I do want that. But I also want to be realistic. Your life is in the city running a major company. Mine is everywhere and nowhere. I go where the photography assignments take me. So we figure it out," Jack said simply. "Maybe I can work remotely sometimes, join you on your travels. Maybe you can base yourself in the city between assignments. I have a ridiculous penthouse with plenty of space for a home photography studio." Ellie laughed. "You've thought this through." "I'm a problem solver by nature," Jack said with a grin. "And this isn't a problem, it's an opportunity. The best one I've had in years." For the rest of the day they enjoyed the resort amenities, swimming in the infinity pool, trying their hand at paddleboarding, where Ellie proved much more adept than Jack, and sharing a leisurely lunch at the beachside cafe. Jack took one more business call in the afternoon, but kept it brief, eager to return to Ellie's company. That evening as they dressed for dinner, Ellie became unusually quiet. Jack noticed, watching as she stood at the mirror, fastening a simple silver necklace. "What's on your mind?" he asked gently. Ellie met his eyes in the mirror. "I'm scared, Jack." "Of what?" "Of how fast this is happening. Of how much I already feel for you." She turned to face him directly. "The last time I loved someone, I lost him. I'm not sure I'm brave enough to risk that again." Jack crossed the room, taking her hands in his. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "Opening yourself up to someone after being closed off for so long, it's terrifying. But Ellie, I think it's worth the risk." "How can you be so sure?" There was genuine vulnerability in her question. "Because for the first time in years I'm thinking about the future and feeling excited instead of just responsible." Jack touched her face gently. "I can't promise we won't face challenges. But I can promise to face them with you if you'll let me." Ellie's smile was tremulous but real. "One day at a time?" One day at a time, Jack agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. Their dinner that night was at the most exclusive restaurant at the resort, with a private table overlooking the water. As they enjoyed the exquisite meal, they talked not about the past but about the future. Tentative plans, possibilities, dreams they'd set aside that now seemed worth revisiting. "I've always wanted to photograph the Grand Canyon," Ellie said. "At sunrise when the light hits the rocks just right." "I've never been," Jack admitted. "We could go together." The simple suggestion, "we could go together," kept repeating throughout their conversation. "We could see the northern lights together. We could learn to sail together. We could. After dinner they walked to a secluded part of the beach, where Jack had arranged for a surprise. A small bonfire, cushions and blankets spread on the sand, and a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket. "When did you organize this?" Ellie asked, delighted. "While you were getting ready for dinner," Jack replied. "The resort staff are remarkably accommodating when you tip well." They sat before the fire, the flames casting a warm glow on their faces as they sipped champagne and watched the stars appear above them. It was a perfect moment, one that Jack knew he would remember for the rest of his life. "Ellie," he said softly, setting down his glass. "There's something I want to ask you." Ellie looked at him, her expression curious. "What is it?" "When we leave here, when we go back to our real lives, would you consider coming to stay with me? Just for a while to see if we can make this work outside of the resort bubble." It was a big request, and Jack held his breath as Ellie considered it. He wouldn't have blamed her for hesitating, for needing time to think. But to his surprise and joy, her answer came quickly and clearly. "Yes," she said simply. "I would like that very much." Relief and happiness washed through Jack. He pulled her close, whispering "thank you" against her hair. They stayed like that, wrapped in each other's arms before the fire, until the flames died down to embers and the stars wheeled overhead, marking the passage of time that for once Jack didn't mind at all. The next few days passed in a blur of happiness for Jack and Ellie. They fell into an easy rhythm together. Morning walks on the beach, afternoons exploring the resort and surrounding area, evenings spent in intimate conversation over dinner or cuddled together watching the sunset. Jack checked in with his company daily, but kept the calls brief, determined to be present with Ellie. On their 5th day together, they decided to venture into the nearby town for a day of exploring. The town was a charming mix of old and new, historic buildings alongside modern shops, local markets filled with colorful produce and handcrafted goods. "I want to get something to remember this by," Jack said as they browsed a shop displaying local artwork. "As if you could forget entering the wrong room," Ellie teased, but her eyes were warm. Jack laughed. "True. But I want something tangible. Something I can look at when we're apart and remember these days." They found it in a small gallery tucked away on a side street, a painting of the beach at sunset, with the distinctive silhouette of the resort in the distance. The colors were vibrant yet somehow peaceful, capturing exactly how Jack felt about his time here with Ellie. "It's perfect," Ellie said, understanding immediately why the painting spoke to him. As the gallery owner wrapped the painting for them, Jack noticed Ellie gazing at a display of black and white photographs on the opposite wall. They were striking images, landscapes and architectural details captured in a way that made the ordinary seem extraordinary. "These are beautiful," Jack commented, joining her. "They are," Ellie agreed, her voice oddly tight. Jack looked more closely at one of the photographs, a close-up of weathered hands holding a fishing net, the texture and details so vivid you could almost feel the rough rope and the years of work etched into the skin. "They remind me a bit of your style," Jack said. "The way you capture details that most people would miss." Ellie nodded, not meeting his eyes. "There's a reason for that." Before Jack could ask what she meant, the gallery owner approached them, the wrapped painting in his hands. As he gave it to Jack, his eyes fell on Ellie, and his expression changed to one of surprise and recognition. "Miss Parker? Ellie Parker?" he asked, his accent lilting. Ellie smiled, though Jack noticed it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes, that's me." The gallery owner's face lit up. "I thought it was you. What an honor to have you in my humble gallery. Your photography has been an inspiration to many of us here." Jack looked between them, confusion evident on his face. The gallery owner noticed and hurried to explain. "Mr. Wilson, your companion is one of the most respected photographers in the business. Her series on disappearing coastal communities won the International Photography Award 3 years ago. These photographs," he gestured to the black and white images, "are actually by her late husband, David Grant. We display them as a tribute to his work." Jack turned to Ellie, surprise written across his features. She was looking at the floor, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "You didn't tell me your work was so well known," Jack said softly. "It didn't seem important," Ellie replied, finally meeting his eyes. "And talking about the awards, it brings up memories of David. He was so proud when I won." Understanding dawned on Jack. Of course she wouldn't want to discuss professional accomplishments tied so closely to painful memories. He squeezed her hand gently, letting her know it was okay. The gallery owner, sensing the emotional undercurrent, tactfully excused himself after asking Ellie to sign his copy of her photography book. When they were alone again, Jack turned to study the photographs more carefully. "David was talented," he said, genuine appreciation in his voice. "He was," Ellie agreed, a sad smile playing at her lips. "We met in photography school. He was always better with people, capturing their essence, their stories. I preferred landscapes, empty spaces." "Until your coastal community series?" Jack prompted gently. Ellie nodded. "That was after his diagnosis. He encouraged me to step outside my comfort zone, to connect with people through my work the way he always had." Her voice softened with memory. "He said if he couldn't keep taking those portraits, someone should. Someone who understood what was being lost." The depth of their connection, of their creative partnership, struck Jack powerfully. It was more than just love. They had shaped each other's art, each other's way of seeing the world. "Thank you for telling me," Jack said simply. Ellie looked at him, really looked at him, as if seeing something new in his face. "You're not jealous? Or uncomfortable hearing about him?" Jack shook his head. "David was a huge part of your life, Ellie. He helped make you who you are. How could I be jealous of that?" Relief and gratitude washed over Ellie's features. "Most men would be." "I'm not most men," Jack replied, echoing her words from days earlier. They left the gallery soon after, Jack carrying his wrapped painting and Ellie seeming lighter somehow, as if sharing this part of her past with Jack had lifted a burden. They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the town, stopping for lunch at a small cafe and visiting the local market, where Ellie couldn't resist photographing the colorful displays of spices and tropical fruits. As they walked back toward the resort in the late afternoon, taking the scenic route along the beach, Ellie suddenly stopped, her attention caught by something in the distance. "Jack, look," she said, pointing toward a small cove down the beach. Jack followed her gaze to see a simple ceremony taking place, what appeared to be a wedding, with a small group gathered around a flower-adorned arch. The bride wore a flowing white dress that caught the breeze, and even from a distance, the joy of the occasion was palpable. "It's beautiful," Jack said. Ellie was already reaching for her camera, capturing the scene with her photographer's instinct. Jack watched her work, admiring the way she moved with purpose, finding the perfect angle to frame the moment. "Claire and I were supposed to get married on a beach," Jack said suddenly, the words coming unbidden. "Not as fancy as this resort, just a simple ceremony near her parents' lake house. She had picked out her dress, we had the date set, and then the accident happened." Ellie lowered her camera, turning to Jack with compassion in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Jack." "It was a long time ago," Jack said, the familiar phrase that didn't quite cover the lingering pain. "But sometimes seeing things like this, it brings it all back." "I know," Ellie said softly. "David and I had our 5th anniversary trip all planned when he got the diagnosis. Sometimes I still catch myself thinking about the reservations we made, the places we were going to visit." They stood together in silence, watching as the distant wedding ceremony concluded and the small group cheered. It was a bittersweet moment, a reminder of what they had both lost, but also, perhaps, a glimpse of what might still be possible. As they turned to continue their walk back to the resort, Jack took Ellie's hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. No words were needed, they understood each other in a way that few others could. That evening, as they prepared for their last dinner at the resort before returning to their respective lives the next day, there was a new depth to their connection. The shared vulnerabilities, the acknowledged losses, had brought them closer in ways that simple attraction never could. Jack watched as Ellie put the finishing touches on her appearance. A touch of lip gloss, a simple gold bracelet. She looked beautiful in a red dress that complemented her dark hair and olive skin. But it was more than her physical beauty that captivated him. It was her strength, her talent, her capacity for joy despite the pain she had endured. "You're staring," Ellie commented, catching his reflection in the mirror. "I'm appreciating," Jack corrected with a smile. "There's a difference." Ellie turned to face him, her expression suddenly serious. "Jack, before we go to dinner, there's something I need to tell you." The tone of her voice sent a ripple of unease through Jack. "What is it?" Ellie took a deep breath. Remember when we first met, and I told you I was only staying at the resort for a short visit? Jack nodded, not sure where this was going. Well, there was another reason I came here besides fulfilling my promise to David. Ellie hesitated, then continued. I've been offered a major assignment, documenting the effects of climate change on island communities across the Pacific. It would mean traveling for 6 months, moving from island to island, often in places with limited communication. Jack felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. When does it start? In 2 weeks, Ellie replied, watching his face carefully. I came here to think about whether I should take it. It's an important project, the kind that could make a real difference. But it would mean putting whatever this is between us on hold, Jack finished for her, gesturing between them. Ellie nodded. I haven't given them my answer yet. I wanted to, but then I met you and everything got complicated in the best possible way. Jack was quiet for a moment, processing this new information. 6 months apart, just as they were beginning to build something together. It wasn't what he wanted, not at all. But he also understood the importance of the work Ellie did, the passion she had for her photography. What are you thinking? Ellie asked, the silence stretching between them. Jack looked at her, his decision already made. I think you should take it. Surprise flickered across Ellie's face. You do. Ellie, your work matters. It makes a difference in the world. I would never ask you to give up an opportunity like that, especially not for a relationship that's just beginning. Jack took her hands in his. If what we have is real, and I believe it is, it can withstand 6 months apart. Relief and gratitude washed over Ellie's features. You mean that? You'd be willing to try long distance, even though we've only known each other for a few days? Those few days have been more meaningful than relationships I've had that lasted years, Jack said honestly. And besides, I'm a billionaire CEO, remember? I have resources. Private jets. Satellite phones. I can come visit you between island hops. We can make this work, Ellie. If you want to. Tears glistened in Ellie's eyes. I do want to. More than anything. Jack pulled her close, holding her as if he could somehow imprint the feeling of her in his arms, a memory to sustain him during the months ahead. Then it's settled. You'll take the assignment and I'll be waiting when you're done. And in between we'll find ways to be together, even across oceans. Ellie looked up at him, wonder in her eyes. How did I get so lucky? Walking into the wrong room at the wrong time? Jack smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I think it was exactly the right room at exactly the right time. As they headed to dinner, hand in hand, Jack felt a mixture of emotions. Sadness at the thought of being separated from Ellie so soon after finding her, but also a profound sense of rightness. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, even if, together, sometimes meant across thousands of miles. And somehow that knowledge made their last night at the resort all the more precious. A beginning rather than an ending, a promise of more to come. The airport was busy, a cacophony of announcements, rolling suitcases and hurried goodbyes. Jack and Ellie stood near the security checkpoint, their hands intertwined, neither wanting to be the first to let go. You've got everything? Jack asked, knowing he was stalling. Passport? Boarding pass? Phone charger? Ellie smiled, recognizing his delay tactic. Yes to all of the above. Plus the satellite phone you insisted on getting me. It'll work anywhere, Jack reminded her. Even on the most remote islands. Just promise you'll use it. I promise. Ellie squeezed his hand. Once a week at minimum. More if I can. 2 weeks had passed since they'd left the resort. 2 weeks of Ellie staying at Jack's penthouse in the city, of showing each other their lives, their routines, their favorite places. 2 weeks of falling deeper into something that neither of them had been looking for but both now cherished. And now Ellie was leaving for her assignment, her camera bags packed with equipment, her heart full of both excitement for the work ahead and reluctance to leave Jack behind. The first island is Tuvalu, she said, though they'd gone over her itinerary multiple times. I'll be there for 3 weeks documenting the rising sea levels and how they're affecting the communities. Then on to Kiribati. Jack nodded, memorizing the details as if they were crucial business data. And I'll meet you in Fiji at the end of month 2, for that conference on sustainable tourism. Which you miraculously got invited to speak at, Ellie said with a knowing smile. Jack had the grace to look slightly sheepish. Being a billionaire does occasionally have its perks. Like being able to call the conference organizers and offer a substantial donation along with my expertise on eco-friendly business practices. Ellie laughed, the sound momentarily lifting the weight of their impending separation. I'm going to miss that, your resourcefulness. And you. I'm really going to miss you, Jack. The announcement for her flight boarding cut through the noise of the terminal, making both of them tense. "That's me," Ellie said softly. Jack pulled her close, memorizing the feel of her in his arms, the scent of her hair, the way she fit against him as if they'd been designed to stand just like this. 6 months, he murmured. "We can do this. It's nothing compared to the lifetime we'll have after." The words were out before he'd fully processed them. A lifetime. It was too soon for such promises, too soon for the certainty he felt. And yet, looking at Ellie's face as she pulled back to meet his eyes, he knew he'd meant every word. "A lifetime sounds pretty good to me," she whispered, leaning up to kiss him one last time. It was a kiss filled with promise, with the bittersweet ache of temporary farewell, with the certainty that this was not an ending but a pause, a comma rather than a period in their story. And then she was walking away, turning back once to wave before disappearing into the sea of travelers beyond the security checkpoint. Jack stood there long after she'd gone from sight, feeling as if a part of him had boarded that plane with her. The first month of separation was the hardest. Jack threw himself back into work, spending long hours at the office not just because the company needed him but because his penthouse felt too empty without Ellie's presence. The painting they'd bought at the resort hung in his living room, a daily reminder of where they'd begun. Ellie's calls came as promised, sometimes late at night, sometimes early in the morning, depending on the time difference and her access to satellite reception. She told him about the islands, about the people she was meeting, about the beauty and the tragedy of communities slowly being reclaimed by rising waters. "Their whole lives are changing," she said during one call, her voice tight with emotion. "Centuries of culture and tradition threatened by something they didn't cause and can't control." "Your photographs will help," Jack assured her. "They'll show the world what's happening, make it real for people who have the power to help." As the weeks passed, they settled into a rhythm of distance. Video calls when possible, voice calls when the internet was unreliable, text messages and emails in between. Jack sent care packages to the various islands on her itinerary, practical items like specialized battery packs for her equipment, but also small luxuries and reminders of him. His favorite coffee that she'd grown to love, a soft scarf that smelled of his cologne, handwritten notes that she could read when they couldn't talk. In return, Ellie sent photographs, not just the professional ones she was taking for her assignment, but personal ones meant only for Jack. Sunrise over a lagoon that reminded her of their morning walks on the beach. A local child's drawing of what their island used to look like. A shell that matched the color of Jack's eyes. At the end of the second month, true to his word, Jack met Ellie in Fiji. The conference on sustainable tourism was legitimate. He did give a speech about environmentally responsible business practices, but it was really just an excuse to see her. 5 precious days they were together again, walking on different beaches, sharing stories of their time apart, falling asleep and waking in each other's arms as if the separation had never happened. "I've been thinking," Jack said on their last night together in Fiji. They were sitting on the balcony of his hotel suite, watching as distant lightning illuminated the clouds over the ocean. "About the future. Our future." Ellie turned to look at him, her expression open and curious. "What about it?" "I want to establish a foundation," Jack explained. "Focused on climate resilience for vulnerable communities, especially island nations like the ones you're documenting. Using technology and resources to help them adapt and preserve their ways of life." Ellie's eyes widened. "Jack, that would be incredible. It would also give us a reason to travel together," Jack continued. "You documenting the communities, me working with them on solutions. Not all the time, we'd still have our home base in the city, but regularly. The best of both worlds." The look on Ellie's face, a mixture of surprise, joy and love, was everything Jack had hoped for. "You've really thought this through, haven't you?" Jack nodded. "I have. These past months, seeing your work through your eyes, understanding what's at stake for these communities, it's changed my perspective. I've always tried to run Wilson Tech ethically, but this would be something more direct, more immediate." "I love the idea," Ellie said, reaching for his hand. "And I love that you're thinking of ways for us to build a life that incorporates both our passions. So you'd be open to it? To collaborating professionally as well as personally?" Ellie's smile was all the answer he needed. "I think we make a pretty good team, Jack Wilson. In all ways." Their parting at the Fiji airport the next day was difficult, but different from their first goodbye. This time they had a clearer vision of what awaited them, not just their reunion in 4 months, but a future built around shared purpose as well as shared love. The 3rd and 4th months of Ellie's assignment brought new challenges. The islands she visited were more remote, the infrastructure less reliable. Her calls became less frequent, sometimes with a week or more of silence that left Jack anxious despite his understanding of the conditions she was working in. During one particularly long gap in communication, Jack did something he'd been considering for weeks. He bought a ring. Not flashy or ostentatious, but a simple platinum band set with a single perfect diamond, classic and timeless like Ellie herself. He wasn't planning to propose immediately upon her return, it was still too soon for that. But he wanted to be ready when the moment was right. When Ellie finally called after 10 days of silence, her voice was tired but excited. "Jack, I'm sorry it's been so long. The storm knocked out all communication on the island, and we've been working non-stop documenting the damage. Are you okay?" It was Jack's first and most important question. "I'm fine," Ellie assured him. "Tired, sunburned despite all the sunscreen, but fine. And Jack, the work we're doing here, it's even more important than I realized. These people's stories need to be told." The pride in her voice, the passion for her work, only made Jack love her more. "Tell me everything," he said, settling in for what he knew would be a long call, regardless of the hour or the business meetings awaiting him in the morning. As the 5th month began, Jack received an unexpected email from Ellie's assignment editor. A request for him to provide a quote for the press release about the upcoming exhibition of Ellie's photographs. It would premiere in New York 2 weeks after her return, showcasing the images and stories she'd been collecting throughout the Pacific. "We understand from Ms. Parker that you've been instrumental in supporting this project," the editor wrote, "and that your company is establishing a foundation to assist the communities featured in the exhibition." Jack smiled as he read the message. Ellie had been talking about him, about their plans. It made the distance seem a little less vast. The 6th and final month of separation was both the easiest and the hardest. Easiest because the end was in sight, hardest because time seemed to crawl when the reunion was so close yet still out of reach. Jack buried himself in preparations, setting up the legal framework for the new foundation, renovating a portion of his penthouse to create a proper studio space for Ellie, a surprise he hoped she would love, finalizing plans for her welcome home. And then, suddenly, it was time. Jack stood in the same airport where they had said goodbye half a year earlier, watching as Ellie's flight status changed from and then suddenly it was time. Jack stood in the same airport where they had said goodbye half a year earlier, watching as Ellie's flight status changed from in air to landed. His heart raced, a mixture of excitement and nervousness making it hard to stand still. Would she be different? Would he? 6 months was a long time, especially given how brief their time together had been before the separation. What if the connection they'd felt had been a vacation romance, unable to withstand the test of time and distance? But all those doubts vanished the moment he saw her walking through the arrival gates. Ellie looked tired, her face tanned from months in the Pacific sun, her clothes wrinkled from the long flight. But her eyes, those eyes that had captivated him from the first moment in the wrong hotel room, lit up when she spotted him. And then she was running, dropping her carry-on bag without a care as she flew into his arms. Jack caught her, lifting her off her feet in a tight embrace that expressed everything words couldn't. The longing, the waiting, the joy of reunion. When he finally set her down, he couldn't stop looking at her, drinking in every detail of her face. "You're really here," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm really here," Ellie confirmed, her smile brighter than any sunrise they'd watched together. "And I'm not going anywhere for a very long time." They collected her luggage and made their way to Jack's waiting car, their hands intertwined as if they were afraid to lose contact even for a moment. The driver, discreetly professional, welcomed Ellie back and then raised the privacy partition, giving them space to reconnect. "I have so much to tell you," Ellie said as the car pulled away from the airport. "So many stories, so many people I want you to meet through my photographs." "I want to hear all of it," Jack assured her. "But first, there's something I need to show you." Ellie looked curious. "What is it?" "A surprise," Jack said with a smile. "At home." When they arrived at the penthouse, Jack took Ellie's hand, leading her inside with barely contained excitement. The main living areas looked as she remembered them, with one significant addition. The painting from the resort now hung prominently above the fireplace, a memory of their beginning. "The painting looks perfect there," Ellie said, touching Jack's arm appreciatively. "That's not the surprise," Jack replied, guiding her down the hallway. "This is." He opened a door that Ellie remembered leading to a rarely used guest room. But what lay beyond the door now was nothing like what she recalled. The space had been transformed into a state-of-the-art photography studio and office. White walls perfect for displaying prints, professional lighting equipment, a high-end computer setup for editing and ample storage for her gear. "Jack," Ellie breathed, stepping into the space with wide eyes. You did this for me? I wanted you to have a space that's yours, Jack explained, watching her reaction carefully. Somewhere you can work when you're not on assignment, display your photographs, maybe even teach workshops if you want. The lighting can be adjusted to mimic natural conditions from different times of day, and there's a darkroom through that door if you ever want to work with film again. Ellie turned in a slow circle, taking in every detail of the thoughtfully designed space. When she finally looked back at Jack, there were tears in her eyes. It's perfect. Absolutely perfect. There's one more thing, Jack said, crossing to a covered wall panel. With a subtle gesture, he removed the covering to reveal a display of photographs, not Ellie's work but David's. The same black and white images they had seen in the gallery near the resort, now professionally mounted and displayed with the respect they deserved. I contacted the gallery owner, Jack explained gently. Asked if we could purchase a set of David's prints. I thought you might want to have them here. A reminder of him, of his talent. Ellie's hand went to her mouth, emotion overwhelming her for a moment. When she could speak, her voice was thick with gratitude. That's the most thoughtful thing anyone has ever done for me, Jack. To honor his memory that way. Jack pulled her close, holding her as she processed the gesture. He'll always be part of your story, Ellie. Which means he's part of our story too. They spent the evening quietly reconnecting, ordering in dinner, sitting close on the sofa as Ellie shared stories from her travels and Jack updated her on the progress of the foundation. It was comfortable, easy, as if the 6 months apart had been merely a brief interruption rather than half a year of separation. As they prepared for bed that night, the familiar routine both knew and remembered, Jack watched Ellie move around the bedroom that was now theirs rather than just his. She belonged here, he realized with absolute certainty. Not just in his home but in his life. What are you thinking about? Ellie asked, catching his thoughtful expression as she emerged from the bathroom. Jack smiled, reaching for her hand and drawing her to sit beside him on the edge of the bed. I'm thinking about how much I love you. The words were simple but profound. The first time either of them had said them aloud, though they had been implied in countless messages and calls over the months apart. Ellie's eyes softened, her hand coming up to touch his face. I love you too, Jack. So much. And I'm thinking, Jack continued, his heart racing with nervous anticipation, that I don't want to spend another day without telling you that. He reached into the drawer of his nightstand, pulling out a small velvet box that made Ellie's eyes widen in surprise. Jack slid down to one knee beside the bed, looking up at the woman who had changed his life by simply being in the wrong room at the right time. Ellie Parker, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind the words. I know it might seem fast to some people. We've only known each other for 7 months and 6 of those were spent apart. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You woke me up from a half-life I didn't even realize I was living. You showed me there's more to existence than work and success. There's connection, purpose, joy. He opened the box to reveal the ring. Simple, elegant, perfectly suited to Ellie's understated style. I'm not asking you to rush into anything. We can have a long engagement, take all the time you need. But I want you to know that I'm committed to this, to us, to building a life together that honors both our pasts and creates something new and beautiful for our future. Tears filled Ellie's eyes as Jack finished. Will you marry me, Ellie? Will you be my partner in everything, life, love, work, purpose? For a moment, Ellie was too overcome to speak. Then, with a joy that seemed to radiate from her entire being, she nodded. Yes, she whispered, and then louder, yes, Jack. I will marry you. Jack slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit just as he'd hoped, and then rose to kiss her, a kiss that sealed their promise and began a new chapter in their unexpected love story. Later, as they lay together in the darkness, Ellie's head resting on Jack's chest, she spoke softly. I was so afraid that night, you know. When you opened the door to my hotel room. Afraid? Jack asked, stroking her hair. I'd been crying over David's photo, feeling guilty for even considering moving on with my life. And then there you were, this handsome stranger who looked just as startled as I felt. Ellie traced patterns on Jack's chest as she spoke. I thought it was a mistake, just a mix-up with the key cards. I never imagined it would lead to this. The best mistake I ever made, Jack murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Do you think they're happy for us? Ellie asked after a moment. Claire and David? Wherever they are. It was a question Jack had asked himself many times over the past months. I do, he said with quiet conviction. I think they would want us to be happy, to love again, to live fully. That's what we would want for them if the situations were reversed. Ellie nodded against his chest. That's what I believe too. As they drifted towards sleep, Wrapped in each other's arms and the promise of a shared future, Jack thought about the strange, winding paths that lead people to each other. How a simple error, a wrong room number, a keycard mishap, could be the beginning of something profound and life-changing. Some would call it chance or coincidence. But lying here with Ellie, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against his own, Jack preferred to think of it as fate. The morning light filtered through the bedroom curtains, casting a warm glow over Jack and Ellie as they lay tangled in sheets, still marveling at the reality of being together again after so many months apart. Ellie's engagement ring caught the sunlight, sending prisms dancing across the ceiling. "I still can't believe it," Ellie said, admiring the ring on her finger. "If someone had told me 7 months ago that I'd be engaged to a billionaire CEO I met because he walked into the wrong hotel room, I would have thought they were crazy." Jack laughed, pulling her closer. "Life is full of surprises. Some of them are even good." They spent the morning in comfortable domesticity, making breakfast together in Jack's gourmet kitchen, catching up on the small details of each other's lives that hadn't made it into their calls and messages. It was Saturday, which meant Jack didn't have to go into the office, though he did check his emails briefly while Ellie unpacked some of her equipment. "The exhibition opening is in 2 weeks, Ellie reminded him as she sorted through memory cards containing thousands of photographs from her assignment. "The editor wants to meet with me on Monday to start the final selection process." "I've already blocked that entire day on my calendar," Jack assured her. "I want to be there for this, Ellie. It's important." The gratitude in her smile warmed his heart. They had spent the afternoon reviewing some of her photographs, powerful images that captured both the beauty of the Pacific Islands and the very real threat they faced from rising sea levels. Jack was in awe of Ellie's talent, her ability to tell stories through images that moved the viewer on both emotional and intellectual levels. "These are going to make a difference," he told her with certainty. "And the foundation will help turn awareness into action." Ellie squeezed his hand. "I've been thinking about names for the foundation. What do you think of Rising Tides? It acknowledges the problem while suggesting that we're rising to meet it." "Rising Tides Foundation," Jack repeated, testing the sound of it. "I like it. It's hopeful without minimizing the challenges." As the day wore on, they discussed plans for the coming weeks, the exhibition opening, the formal announcement of the foundation, and more personally, how to share the news of their engagement with friends and colleagues. "I don't have much family," Ellie admitted. "Just a cousin in Seattle I'm close with, but I have friends who became family after David died. They helped me through the darkest times." "I want to meet them," Jack said. "All of them. The people who matter to you." They decided to host a small dinner party the following weekend, a chance to introduce Jack to Ellie's circle of friends and to share their engagement news in person. Jack had a few close friends of his own, mostly from his college days before business success had complicated his social life, and he wanted them to meet Ellie as well. That evening, they ventured out for dinner at one of Jack's favorite restaurants. It was their first public appearance together in the city, and despite the discreet nature of the upscale establishment, Jack noticed a few curious glances in their direction. "I should warn you," he said as they were seated at a private table in the corner, "there might be some media interest in us. CEO of Wilson Tech gets engaged. It's the kind of human interest story that business reporters love." Ellie seemed unfazed. "I've had my photographs in galleries around the world. I can handle a few nosy reporters." Jack smiled at her confidence. "Just so you know, my PR team is at your disposal if you ever need help dealing with media attention." "I appreciate that," Ellie said, "but I think we'll be fine. We're not exactly Hollywood celebrities." The meal was excellent, the conversation easy and intimate. They were discussing plans for a short trip to introduce Ellie to Jack's parents when a well-dressed man approached their table. "Jack Wilson," the man said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I thought that was you." Jack looked up, recognition dawning on his face. "Robert. It's been a while." "Too long," Robert agreed, his gaze sliding to Ellie with obvious interest. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your companion?" There was something in his tone that made Ellie sit up straighter, her photographer's instinct for reading people alerting her to an undercurrent of tension. "Of course," Jack said smoothly. "Ellie Parker, this is Robert Danvers, CEO of Spectrum Technologies. Robert, this is Ellie Parker, my fiancée." If Robert was surprised by the introduction, he hid it well. "Fiancée? That's unexpected. Congratulations to you both." "Thank you," Ellie replied, shaking his offered hand briefly. "Ellie is an award-winning photographer," Jack added, a note of pride in his voice. "She just returned from documenting climate change impacts across the Pacific." Robert's smile remained fixed. "How fascinating. And a far cry from your usual type, Jack. Last I heard you were seeing that Brazilian model. What was her name? Adriana? Jack's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. That was a brief connection over 2 years ago. Nothing serious. If you say so, Robert said with a shrug. Well, I won't interrupt your evening further. Lovely to meet you, Miss Parker. Jack, we should catch up soon. I hear you're working on some interesting new security protocols at Wilson Tech. After Robert walked away, Ellie raised an eyebrow at Jack. That was interesting. Friend of yours? Competitor, Jack clarified. And occasional partner when projects require collaboration. He's brilliant but ruthless. The kind of businessman who gives the rest of us a bad name. And the comment about the model? Ellie asked, her tone casual but her eyes watchful. Jack sighed. After Claire, I dated occasionally. Nothing serious or lasting. There was a brief connection with a model named Adriana whom I met at a charity gala. The gossip columns made more of it than there was. It lasted all of 3 weeks. Ellie nodded, accepting his explanation. We all have past, Jack. I'm not concerned about who you dated before me. But you are concerned about something, Jack observed, reading the slight furrow between her brows. Ellie hesitated, then asked, Is that how it's going to be? People looking at me and wondering what a billionaire CEO is doing with someone like me? Someone like you? Jack repeated, reaching across the table to take her hand. You mean someone talented, compassionate, and genuine? Someone who makes a real difference in the world? Trust me, Ellie, anyone who knows me understands exactly why I fell in love with you. Her expression softened. I'm not worried about myself. I just don't want to be a liability to you in your business world. You could never be a liability, Jack assured her. If anything, your influence has made me a better leader, more focused on what really matters. The foundation we're creating together is proof of that. By the time they returned to the penthouse that night, the brief moment of uncertainty had passed, replaced by the easy comfort they found in each other's company. As they prepared for bed, Jack received an email notification on his phone that made him pause. What is it? Ellie asked, noticing his expression. An invitation, Jack said, showing her the screen. To the Governor's Climate Initiative Gala next month. They want us both to attend, you as a featured photographer whose work will be displayed, me as a business leader launching a climate-focused foundation. Ellie's eyes widened. That's a major event. The kind that attracts serious policy makers and influencers. It's perfect timing with the launch of Rising Tides, Jack agreed. But only if you're comfortable with it. It would put us squarely in the public eye. Ellie considered for a moment, then nodded decisively. If it helps bring attention to the issues I've been documenting, then yes. Let's do it. Jack sent a quick reply accepting the invitation, then set his phone aside. As they settled into bed, he pulled Ellie close, still marveling at the fact that she was really here, really his. You know, he murmured against her hair, for someone who spent years avoiding emotional connections, I've become surprisingly fond of them. Ellie laughed softly. Just fond? Desperately in love with and completely unable to imagine life without, Jack corrected, pressing a kiss to her temple. Better? Much, Ellie agreed, turning in his arms to kiss him properly. As they drifted off to sleep, Jack reflected on the strange, wonderful journey that had brought them to this moment. From a chance encounter in the wrong hotel room to planning a life together, it was more than he had ever dared to hope for after losing Claire. And tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, new opportunities to build something meaningful together. The week that followed was a whirlwind of activity. Ellie met with her editor to select the final photographs for the exhibition, while Jack juggled his company responsibilities with preparations for the official launch of the Rising Tides Foundation. They worked together on the guest list for their engagement dinner, selecting a mix of close friends who would understand and support their relatively quick journey to commitment. On Friday afternoon, Jack left the office early to help Ellie prepare for the dinner party. He found her in the kitchen, arranging flowers in a vase with the same careful attention she gave to composing a photograph. Need any help? He asked, setting his briefcase aside and loosening his tie. Ellie looked up with a smile. You could open the wine to let it breathe. The caterers will be here at 6 to set up. Jack raised an eyebrow. Caterers? I thought we were cooking. That was before I remembered that I've been living on island food for 6 months and you survive primarily on takeout and business dinners, Ellie replied with a laugh. I want to impress our friends, not poison them. Fair point, Jack conceded, fetching a bottle of wine from his well-stocked cellar. As he opened it, he watched Ellie move around the space that was becoming theirs rather than just his. She had already added small touches throughout the penthouse. Photographs on walls that had been bare, colorful throw pillows on the sofa, a collection of shells from the Pacific Islands arranged artfully on a side table. "Have I told you today how happy I am that you're here?" Jack asked. Ellie paused in her flower arranging, her expression softening. "You might have mentioned it once or twice. But I don't mind hearing it again." Jack crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "I'm happier than I've been in years. Possibly ever." Ellie leaned back against him, her hands coming up to cover his where they rested on her waist. "Me too, Jack. Even with all the uncertainty ahead, the exhibition, the foundation, figuring out how to merge our lives, I've never felt more. Right?" They stood like that for a moment, savoring the simple joy of being together, until the intercom buzzed, announcing the arrival of the caterers. The dinner party that evening was a success by any measure. Ellie's closest friends, a fellow photographer who had mentored her early in her career, a gallery owner who had given her her first show, and a couple who had been friends with both her and David, welcomed Jack warmly into their circle. Jack's friends, his college roommate who was now a professor, a software developer who had worked with him in the early days of Wilson Tech, and his loyal assistant Sarah who was more friend than employee, were equally welcoming to Ellie. As they gathered around the dining table, sharing stories and getting to know one another, Jack watched Ellie in her element, connecting people, drawing out quieter guests, making everyone feel included. She was a natural hostess, just as she was a natural at capturing moments through her camera lens. "So, how did you two meet?" asked Michael, the gallery owner, as they enjoyed the main course. Ellie's been mysterious about the details. Jack and Ellie exchanged a smile, a private acknowledgement of their unusual beginning. "Would you believe he broke into my hotel room?" Ellie said with a laugh. "I did not break in," Jack protested good-naturedly. "My key card worked. It was the hotel's mistake." As they took turns telling the story of their first meeting, their friends listened with obvious delight at the serendipity of it all. "So you're saying if the hotel hadn't messed up the key cards, you two might never have met?" Sarah asked, always attentive to details. "I like to think we would have found each other somehow," Jack replied, his gaze meeting Ellie's across the table. "Some connections are just meant to be." The warmth in Ellie's eyes told him she felt the same way. After dinner, as they moved to the living room for coffee and dessert, Jack noticed Ellie in quiet conversation with Lisa, the wife of the couple who had been friends with David. Though he couldn't hear what they were saying, he could see Lisa wiping away a tear before pulling Ellie into a tight hug. Later, when their guests had departed and they were clearing the last of the glasses, Jack asked about that moment. "Lisa was telling me how happy she is for us," Ellie explained, her own eyes a bit misty at the memory. "She said David would be too, that he always worried about me being alone after he was gone." Jack set down the glasses he was carrying and pulled Ellie into a gentle embrace. "I wish I could have known him," he said softly. "From everything you've told me, he was a remarkable man." "He was," Ellie agreed. "And he would have liked you, Jack. Not just because you make me happy but because you understand what matters in life. It took him getting sick for us to really see that time is precious, relationships are what make life worth living." "A lesson I'm still learning," Jack admitted. "But having you in my life has accelerated the process considerably." As they finished cleaning up and prepared for bed, both tired but content after the successful evening, Jack's phone chimed with an incoming message. He checked it with a small frown. "What is it?" Ellie asked, noticing his expression. "Remember Robert Danvers from the restaurant the other night?" Jack showed her the screen, where a business news alert displayed a headline, "Spectrum Technologies in talks to acquire Wilson Tech rival." "Is that bad?" Ellie asked, trying to understand the implications. Jack shrugged, setting the phone aside. "It's business. Robert's been trying to position Spectrum as a direct competitor to Wilson Tech for years. This is just his latest move on the chessboard. Should you be worried?" "No," Jack said firmly. "Wilson Tech is solid. Our security protocols are the industry standard, our customer base is loyal, and our newest innovations are years ahead of anything Spectrum is developing." Ellie studied his face, her photographer's eye missing nothing. "But," Jack smiled ruefully. "But Robert is ambitious and not always ethical. I'll need to keep an eye on this situation." "We'll keep an eye on it," Ellie corrected gently. "Your challenges are my challenges now, remember?" The simple declaration, "we not you," warmed Jack's heart. After years of facing every business crisis alone, the idea of having a partner, someone to share both the burdens and the triumphs, was still new and precious. "Thank you," he said simply, kissing her softly. That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Jack found himself thinking about the future. Not just the immediate plans for the exhibition and foundation, but the longer term. The life they would build together, the possibility of a family someday, the chance to create something that would outlast them both. It was not a future he had dared to imagine after losing Claire. But now, with Ellie beside him, it seemed not just possible but inevitable. A path unfolding before them, full of promise and purpose. "What are you thinking about?" Ellie asked sleepily, sensing his wakefulness. "The future," Jack replied honestly. "Our future." Ellie's hand found his in the darkness, their fingers intertwining. "It's going to be quite an adventure, isn't it?" "The best kind," Jack agreed, pulling her closer. As they drifted off to sleep, Jack's last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude, for wrong room numbers, for second chances at love, and for the woman who had walked into his life and changed everything. The 2 weeks leading up to Ellie's exhibition opening flew by in a whirlwind of activity. Jack balanced his responsibilities at Wilson Tech with supporting Ellie's preparations, often working late into the night on foundation paperwork after spending the evening with her at the gallery where her photographs were being installed. The night before the opening, they stood alone in the exhibition space, surrounded by Ellie's powerful images of Pacific Island communities facing the reality of climate change. Each photograph told a story, of resilience, of vulnerability, of cultures fighting to preserve their heritage against rising waters. "It's extraordinary, Ellie," Jack said, his voice hushed in the quiet gallery. "Seeing them all together like this. It's even more impactful than I imagined." Ellie leaned against him, emotionally drained but satisfied with the final result. "Do you think it will make a difference? Will people see these images and actually care enough to act?" "Some will," Jack replied honestly. "Not everyone. But enough to matter. And with the foundation providing practical support to these communities, your photographs won't just raise awareness, they'll be the first step toward real solutions." The opening night was a triumph by any measure. The gallery was packed with critics, photographers, environmental activists, and society figures drawn by both the importance of the subject matter and the buzz surrounding Ellie and Jack's engagement. Ellie, elegant in a simple black dress that highlighted her natural beauty, moved through the crowd with grace, discussing her work and the experiences behind each image. Jack watched her with pride, occasionally joining conversations when invited but mostly letting Ellie shine in her well-deserved spotlight. He had positioned himself near a particularly powerful photograph, an elderly island chief standing knee-deep in water where his ancestral home had once stood, when he overheard a conversation that made him pause. "She's certainly landed on her feet, hasn't she?" a woman's voice said, low but not low enough. "First marriage to David Grant, now engaged to Jack Wilson. Some people have all the luck. They say she was just a middling photographer before she married Grant," another voice replied. "And now look, dating a billionaire and suddenly she gets a major exhibition." Jack turned, unable to let such comments pass unchallenged. The speakers, two stylishly dressed women who clearly hadn't realized he was within earshot, blanched when they recognized him. "Excuse me," Jack said, his voice polite but cold. "I couldn't help overhearing your conversation about my fiancé, Mr. Wilson," one of the women stammered. "We were just spreading uninformed gossip, it seems," Jack interrupted smoothly. "For the record, Ellie Parker was winning awards for her photography long before she met either David Grant or myself. This exhibition was commissioned based on the strength of her previous work documenting environmental issues. And if you look at these photographs, really look at them, you'll see the work of an artist with extraordinary talent and compassion." The women had the grace to look embarrassed. "Of course," the second one murmured. "We didn't mean to imply." "I think you did," Jack said, still maintaining his calm demeanor. "But I understand. It's easier to attribute a woman's success to her relationships than to her own abilities, isn't it? Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to continue appreciating my fiancé's remarkable work." He walked away, his heart pounding with a mixture of anger and protectiveness. It wasn't the first time he'd encountered such attitudes in his business life, people assuming connections rather than competence were behind success, especially for women, but hearing it directed at Ellie stung more personally. A few minutes later, Ellie found him, her eyes bright with excitement. "The curator from the National Geographic Society wants to discuss featuring some of these images in their climate change awareness campaign," she told him, then paused, noticing his expression. "Is everything okay?" Jack forced a smile, not wanting to dampen her well-deserved triumph. "Everything's perfect. I'm just in awe of what you've accomplished here." Ellie studied his face, clearly not entirely convinced, but let it pass as another group of admirers approached to congratulate her on the exhibition. Later that night, as they returned to the penthouse exhausted but elated by the success of the opening, Jack decided to tell Ellie about the overheard conversation. She deserved to know the kind of talk that might be circulating, however unfair and untrue. "That kind of gossip doesn't surprise me," Ellie said after he'd recounted the incident, kicking off her heels and curling up on the sofa. "I heard similar things after I married David. That I was riding his coattails, using his connections. It makes me furious," Jack admitted, loosening his tie. "Your talent is so obvious to anyone who actually looks at your work." Ellie's smile was tired but philosophical. "People will always talk, Jack. Especially when it involves someone in your position. I knew that was part of the package when I fell in love with you." "It shouldn't be," Jack said, sitting beside her and pulling her close. "You should be judged solely on your remarkable work. In a perfect world, maybe." Ellie rested her head on his shoulder. "But I'm not going to let a few catty comments diminish tonight's success. Did you see how moved people were by the photographs? That's what matters." Jack marveled at her resilience, her ability to focus on what was important and let the rest slide away. It was a quality he was still working to develop himself. The capacity to separate what truly mattered from the noise and distraction of others' opinions. The days following the exhibition opening brought a flurry of positive reviews in art publications and environmental magazines. Ellie's photographs were praised for their technical excellence and emotional impact, with several critics noting how they humanized the often abstract concept of climate change. The Rising Tides Foundation, officially launched at the exhibition, received its first significant donations from attendees moved by the images they had seen. But success also brought increased public attention. Jack was used to a certain level of scrutiny as the CEO of Wilson Tech, but the combination of his engagement to Ellie and their joint work on the foundation elevated their profile considerably. When a major business magazine requested an interview with both of them for a feature on power couples using their influence for social good, Jack was hesitant. "We don't need to do this," he told Ellie as they discussed the request over breakfast. "My PR team can decline politely." Ellie considered the idea as she sipped her coffee. "What's your hesitation exactly? Privacy concerns?" Jack nodded. "Partly that. Once we open this door, it's hard to close it again. And partly." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I don't want our relationship to become public property. Something for strangers to speculate about and judge. Like those women at the gallery," Ellie surmised. "Exactly. But I also understand that publicity could benefit the foundation, bring more attention to the causes we care about." Jack ran a hand through his hair, genuinely torn. "What do you think?" Ellie was quiet for a moment, weighing the options. "I think," she finally said, "that we can set boundaries while still sharing parts of our story that might inspire others. We don't have to give them every detail, but talking about how we're combining our different skills and backgrounds to address climate impacts, that could be valuable." Jack smiled, once again impressed by her balanced perspective. "So we do the interview but on our terms?" "On our terms," Ellie agreed. "And Jack? I'm not afraid of public attention. My work has always been public. That's the whole point of photography for me, sharing what I see with others. Your business success has been more private, I understand that. But together, I think we can navigate this middle ground." The interview, when it took place the following week, was conducted in Jack's penthouse, with Ellie's exhibition photographs prominently displayed on the walls. The journalist, a respected business writer known for her thoughtful profiles, asked about their individual careers, their meeting, which they described somewhat vaguely as at a resort without mentioning the wrong room detail, and their vision for the Rising Tides Foundation. "What made you, as a tech CEO, decide to focus on climate resilience for island nations?" she asked Jack at one point. "It seems quite removed from your usual business interests." Jack glanced at Ellie before answering. "Meeting Ellie changed my perspective in many ways. Seeing her dedication to documenting these communities, understanding the urgency of their situation, it made me realize that business success is meaningless if it's not connected to the wider world. Technology can solve problems, but first we have to decide which problems matter most." "And Ellie, has Jack's business background influenced your approach to photography and advocacy?" Ellie nodded. "Absolutely. I've always believed in the power of images to move people emotionally, but Jack has taught me to think about systematic approaches, scalable solutions. It's not enough to raise awareness, you need to channel that awareness into practical action. That's what Rising Tides is designed to do." Throughout the interview, they carefully maintained the balance they had discussed. Open enough to seem authentic, guarded enough to protect their private connection. When the article was published 2 weeks later, with elegant photographs of them in their penthouse surrounded by Ellie's work, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Rising together, how tech billionaire Jack Wilson and award-winning photographer Ellie Parker are changing the climate conversation. The headline captured exactly what they had hoped to convey, a focus on their work rather than just their romance. "We make a pretty good team," Jack commented as they read the article together one Sunday morning, still in their pajamas, coffee mugs in hand. "We do," Ellie agreed, leaning against him on the sofa. Even with the increased attention, that attention continued to grow as the governor's climate initiative gala approached. Ellie's exhibition had traveled to 2 more galleries, gaining momentum and media coverage with each new location. Jack had given a well-received speech at a technology conference about the role of innovation in addressing climate challenges. The Rising Tides Foundation had funded its first 2 projects, a sea wall for a vulnerable coastal village and a digital archiving program to preserve cultural heritage that might otherwise be lost to rising waters. Through it all, they worked to maintain the boundary between their public and private lives, giving interviews about their work while keeping the details of their relationship largely to themselves. But the balance was sometimes difficult to maintain, especially as interest in their story increased. One evening, as they were leaving a restaurant after dinner, they found several photographers waiting outside. The flashes startled Ellie, though Jack was more accustomed to such attention. "Mr. Wilson. Miss Parker. When's the wedding?" one called out as Jack guided Ellie through the crowd to their waiting car. "Any truth to the rumors that you're expecting?" another shouted, a question so unexpected that Ellie nearly stumbled. Jack's arm tightened protectively around her as they reached the car, his expression hard as he faced the photographers. "Gentlemen, please respect our privacy. We're happy to discuss our work with the foundation, but our personal lives are not for public consumption." Once safely in the car, Ellie let out a shaky breath. That was intense. "I'm sorry," Jack said, genuine regret in his voice. "This is the part of my life I was hoping wouldn't affect you." "It's not your fault," Ellie assured him, squeezing his hand. "And really, it's a small price to pay for everything else we have together." But Jack noticed that she glanced back nervously as their car pulled away, checking to see if they were being followed. It was a small gesture, but it bothered him deeply. The idea that their relationship, something pure and precious, was being turned into fodder for gossip and speculation. When they arrived home, Jack made a call to his security team, arranging for additional measures to ensure their privacy. It wasn't the life he had wanted for them, but he was determined to protect what they had built together. The night of the governor's climate initiative gala arrived with all the pomp and circumstance of a major political event. The grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel had been transformed for the occasion, with Ellie's photographs prominently displayed throughout the space. A selection of her images from the Pacific Island communities affected by climate change created a powerful backdrop for the evening's fundraising efforts. Ellie, stunning in a floor-length emerald gown that complemented her olive skin and dark hair, looked every bit the accomplished professional as she discussed her work with governors, senators, and business leaders. Jack, handsome in his tuxedo, moved easily between conversations about technology, policy, and philanthropy, always finding his way back to Ellie's side at regular intervals. "You're a natural at this," he murmured during a brief moment alone, admiring how smoothly she navigated the high-powered crowd. "Not really," Ellie admitted with a small smile. "I'm channeling my inner Jack Wilson, composed, articulate, focused on the mission." Jack laughed softly. "And here I've been channeling my inner Ellie Parker, warm, authentic, genuinely caring about the people behind the policies." It was true, they had begun to adopt each other's strengths, growing together in ways that made them both more effective in their respective fields. Jack had become more compassionate in his business dealings, more mindful of the human impact of technological decisions. Ellie had become more strategic in her advocacy, using her photography not just to document problems but to catalyze specific solutions. The evening progressed successfully, with the governor publicly praising both Ellie's work and the Rising Tides Foundation. Jack gave a brief but powerful speech about the intersection of technology and environmental responsibility, and Ellie spoke movingly about the community she had photographed, turning statistics into stories that resonated with the influential audience. As the formal program concluded and the evening shifted to dancing and continued networking, Jack was approached by Robert Danvers, the Spectrum Technologies CEO who had been making competitive moves against Wilson Tech. "Quite a performance, Jack," Robert said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "The caring billionaire saving the world one island at a time." Jack maintained his composure, aware that many eyes were on them. It's not a performance, Robert. Climate resilience is a genuine concern, and one that the tech industry has a responsibility to address. Of course, Robert agreed with false sincerity. And the beautiful, talented fiancée championing the cause, that's just a happy coincidence, I'm sure. Jack felt a flash of anger but kept his expression neutral. Ellie's work stands on its own merits. As does mine. As does yours, when you choose to focus on innovation rather than competition. Robert's smile tightened. Speaking of competition, I imagine you've seen the news about our latest acquisition? I have, Jack acknowledged. Congratulations on the merger. Though I'm curious how Spectrum plans to integrate their security protocols with yours, given the known vulnerabilities in your system. It was a pointed reference to a recent, quietly managed security breach at Spectrum, not public knowledge but something Jack had been briefed on through industry channels. Robert's momentary flash of surprise confirmed that the hit had landed. Our security is state-of-the-art, Robert recovered quickly. But then you've always been paranoid about such things, haven't you, Jack? Ever since the Claire incident. The casual reference to Claire, to the car accident that had taken her life, was like a physical blow. Jack stiffened, his composure finally cracking. Don't you dare speak her name, he said, his voice low but intense. Robert held up his hands in mock surrender. No offense intended. Ancient history after all. You've clearly moved on. His gaze shifted meaningfully to where Ellie stood across the room, in conversation with the governor's wife. Before Jack could respond, he felt a gentle hand on his arm. Ellie had somehow sensed the tension and materialized at his side, her presence immediately calming. Robert, isn't it? She said smoothly. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Ellie Parker. Her poise and timing gave Jack the moment he needed to regain his composure. Robert, forced into civility by Ellie's gracious approach, made small talk for a few minutes before excusing himself to speak with a senator across the room. Thank you, Jack said quietly once Robert was gone. He was pushing buttons. Ellie squeezed his arm gently. I could tell. Are you okay? Jack nodded, though the encounter had left him unsettled. I'm fine. He just mentioned Claire in a way that was deliberately provocative. Understanding filled Ellie's eyes. I'm sorry. That was cruel of him. It's an old tactic, Jack said, trying to dismiss the effect Robert's words had had on him. Find a weakness and exploit it. Standard business practice for his type. But Ellie wasn't fooled. It's not just business when it's someone you love, Jack. It's okay to be affected by that. Her perception, her ability to see through his practice CEO composure to the man beneath, was one of the things Jack loved most about her. He leaned down to kiss her cheek, a small public display of affection that felt right in the moment. Have I mentioned lately that I'm the luckiest man in this room? He murmured. Ellie smiled up at him, her eyes warm. Not in the last hour or so. A serious oversight on my part, Jack replied, leading her toward the dance floor. Let me make it up to you. As they danced, moving together in perfect harmony as they had since that first night at the resort, Jack made a conscious decision to put the encounter with Robert out of his mind. This night was about celebrating their joint work, about advancing the causes they believed in. He wouldn't let old rivalries or painful memories diminish that. But later that night, as Ellie slept beside him in their penthouse bedroom, Jack found himself still awake, turning over Robert's words. The reference to Claire had been deliberately cruel, designed to throw Jack off balance. But more concerning was the implication about security vulnerabilities at Wilson Tech. Not because they existed, but because Robert's interest suggested he might be looking for weaknesses to exploit. Jack reached for his phone, sending a message to his head of security requesting a complete systems review first thing in the morning. It was probably an overreaction, but in the technology security business, paranoia was a professional asset, not a liability. Setting his phone aside, Jack turned to look at Ellie's peaceful sleeping form. In the soft light from the city beyond their windows, she looked both vulnerable and strong, the contradiction that had drawn him to her from the beginning. He had spent years building walls around himself after Claire's death, around his company, around his heart. And then Ellie had walked into his life through a mistakenly unlocked door, and those walls had begun to crumble in the best possible way. Whatever challenges lay ahead, from business rivals, from public scrutiny, from the complex problems they were trying to solve through the foundation, Jack knew they would face them together. With that reassuring thought, he finally drifted off to sleep, his arm protectively around the woman who had changed everything. The next morning brought a flurry of positive press about the gala and their role in it. Photographs of Jack and Ellie appeared in society pages and business publications alike, accompanied by glowing coverage of the Rising Tides Foundation's mission. Ellie's exhibition, featured prominently at the event, received renewed attention, with several major museums expressing interest in hosting it. But alongside the positive coverage came increased speculative interest in their personal lives. One tabloid ran a particularly invasive story with the headline "Wedding Bells and Baby Plans for Tech's Golden Couple?", complete with paparazzi photos of them leaving the restaurant days earlier. "This is ridiculous," Ellie said as she scanned the article over breakfast. "They're quoting sources close to the couple about our supposed plans for a family. Who would even claim to know that?" Jack frowned, equally disturbed by the invasion of privacy. "Unfortunately, people make things up for attention or money. My PR team can issue a statement asking for privacy, but that sometimes just fuels more speculation. It's the price of the platform, I guess," Ellie said with a sigh, closing the tabloid website on her tablet. "If we want to reach people with the Foundation's message, we have to accept some level of public interest in our lives." "Within reason," Jack insisted. "There's a line between public figures and public property. We need to establish that boundary clearly." Their conversation was interrupted by a call from Jack's head of security, responding to his late-night message. Jack excused himself to take it in his home office, returning 15 minutes later with a serious expression. "What is it?" Ellie asked, immediately noticing the change in his demeanor. "Probably nothing," Jack said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But my security team found some unusual activity in our networks overnight. Likely just routine probing that all tech companies face, but given Robert's comments last night." "You think Spectrum might be trying to hack Wilson Tech?" Ellie asked, concerned by the implications. Jack shook his head slightly. "It would be an incredibly risky move for them legally. More likely they're just looking for information, product development plans, client lists, that sort of thing. Corporate espionage is unfortunately common in our industry." "What will you do?" "Increase our security protocols, monitor the situation closely, and let Robert know indirectly that we're aware of the activity." Jack reached for Ellie's hand across the table. "I don't want you to worry about this. It's standard business maneuvering, nothing more." But Ellie, perceptive as always, sensed there was more to his concern. "Is it because he mentioned Claire? Because he tried to use her to upset you?" Jack was silent for a moment, considering how much to share. Ellie deserved honesty, but he didn't want to burden her with old ghosts. "Partly," he finally admitted. "After Claire died, I became obsessed with security. Personal security, digital security, financial security. I built walls around everything I cared about." "A natural response to loss," Ellie said gently. "I did something similar after David died, threw myself into work, avoided new connections, stayed in motion so I wouldn't have to feel the pain of standing still." "Exactly," Jack agreed, grateful for her understanding. But Robert bringing up Claire, especially in the context of security concerns, it hit those old buttons hard. Ellie squeezed his hand. "Jack, it's okay to protect what matters to you. That's not paranoia, it's wisdom. Just don't let old fears keep you from living fully now." It was exactly what he needed to hear. Acknowledgement of his concerns without feeding them, permission to be cautious without being controlled by caution. Once again, Ellie had seen to the heart of the matter with her characteristic clarity. "Thank you," Jack said simply, raising her hand to his lips. "For understanding." "Always," Ellie promised. "Now, should we talk about something more pleasant? Like the official launch of the Rising Tides educational initiative next week." Jack smiled, grateful for the shift in focus. "Absolutely. The curriculum development team sent over the final materials yesterday. I think you'll be impressed by how they've incorporated your photographs into the lessons." As they discussed the Foundation's newest project, an educational program designed to help students understand climate impacts and potential solutions, Jack felt the tension from the security concerns and tabloid invasion gradually easing. This was what mattered. The work they were doing together, the future they were building, the difference they were making. The rest, corporate rivalries, media speculation, even the ghosts of past losses, those were just obstacles to navigate on their journey together. And navigate them they would, side by side. The following week brought a new development that neither of them had anticipated. Jack was in a board meeting when his assistant quietly slipped him a note. "Urgent call from Ellie. Please step out when possible." Concern immediately flooded him. Ellie rarely interrupted his work unless it was truly important. Excusing himself from the meeting, Jack stepped into his private office to return the call. "Ellie? What's wrong?" he asked the moment she answered. Nothing's wrong, she assured him quickly. But something unexpected has happened. I just got a call from National Geographic. They want to commission me for a new project, documenting the effects of rising sea levels on coastal communities around the world, not just in the Pacific. That's wonderful news, Jack said, relief giving way to genuine happiness for her. It's exactly the kind of recognition your work deserves. There's more, Ellie continued, excitement evident in her voice. They want to expand it into a major documentary project. Multiple countries, a full film crew working with me, global distribution. Ellie, that's incredible, Jack said, understanding the magnitude of the opportunity. National Geographic documentaries reached millions, bringing critical issues into living rooms around the world. When would it start? There was a brief pause before Ellie answered. That's the complicated part. They want to begin in 3 months, and the project would run for potentially a year or more. Jack absorbed this information, understanding immediately what it meant. More time apart just when they had become so accustomed to building their life together. A year of travel, he said, keeping his tone neutral. Not continuously, Ellie clarified quickly. It would be structured in segments, 6 to 8 weeks on location, then time back home before the next segment. And they're open to having the Rising Tides Foundation involved, featuring our work as part of the solutions segment of the documentary. That's a nice touch, Jack acknowledged. Integrating our joint work into your photography project. I haven't said yes yet, Ellie added. I wanted to talk to you first. This would affect both of us, our plans together. Jack was touched by her consideration, though he had never doubted it. Ellie, this is an extraordinary opportunity. A chance to bring these issues to a global audience, to make an even bigger impact with your work. Of course you should say yes. But what about us? Our wedding planning, the foundation events we've scheduled, our life together. The concern in her voice was evident, even through her excitement about the opportunity. We'll make it work, Jack said with certainty. I can travel to join you between segments. We can coordinate foundation activities with your filming schedule. As for the wedding, he paused, thinking. What if we don't wait? What if we get married before you start the project? There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. You mean, in the next 3 months? Ellie finally asked. Why not? Jack found himself warming to the idea the more he considered it. Not a huge public event that would take forever to plan, just something small and meaningful with the people closest to us. Before you begin this new journey, we could begin ours officially. Jack Wilson, Ellie said, her voice filled with emotion, are you suggesting we elope? Jack laughed. Not exactly eloping if we plan it and invite guests. But yes, something simple and soon. What do you think? I think. Ellie paused, and Jack could almost see her considering the idea, turning it over in her mind the way she would compose a photograph. I think I love it, and I love you for suggesting it, for making this feel possible. That's what partners do, Jack said simply. We find ways to support each other's dreams while building our shared ones. They talked for a few more minutes, the excitement of both the National Geographic opportunity and the accelerated wedding plans energizing their conversation. By the time Jack returned to his board meeting, they had already begun to sketch out possibilities. A ceremony perhaps at the resort where they had met, intimate and meaningful, followed by a honeymoon that could coincide with the first segment of Ellie's documentary work. As Jack rejoined the meeting, offering apologies for the interruption, he found himself thinking about how different his life had become in less than a year. From a solitary existence focused almost entirely on work to a partnership that expanded rather than limited his horizons. It was a transformation he could never have predicted but now couldn't imagine living without. The board members, noticing his unusually upbeat mood after what they had assumed was an urgent interruption, exchanged curious glances. Jack's assistant, who had been briefed on the call, simply smiled knowingly as she handed him the updated meeting agenda. Life, Jack reflected as the meeting resumed, had a way of offering the most beautiful surprises through the most unexpected doors, even the wrong ones. Are you sure about this? Sarah asked, straightening Jack's tie with the familiarity of a longtime assistant who had become a trusted friend. Getting married at the same resort where you met, just 2 months after deciding to do it? Jack smiled at her concern. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. They stood in a suite at the Silver Sands Resort, the same resort where, 11 months earlier, Jack had accidentally entered the wrong room and found Ellie. Today, that chance encounter would culminate in a wedding ceremony on the beach at sunset, with just 30 of their closest friends and family in attendance. Besides, Jack added, when have you known me to hesitate once I've made a decision? Sarah laughed, adjusting his boutonniere, a simple white flower with a sprig of sea lavender. Fair point. You've always known your own mind. But this is different from a business decision. Yes and no, Jack replied thoughtfully. The best business decisions I've ever made came from a combination of careful analysis and gut instinct. That's exactly how I feel about marrying Ellie. It makes sense on every level, practical and emotional. The past 2 months had been a whirlwind of activity, planning the intimate wedding while simultaneously preparing for Ellie's National Geographic assignment and continuing their work with the Rising Tides Foundation. They had decided to merge all three, turning their wedding into not just a celebration of their love but also a working retreat for the foundation's core team and an opportunity to capture preliminary footage for the documentary. It was unconventional, certainly. But then, so was their entire relationship, from its serendipitous beginning to the way they had built something meaningful together despite their different backgrounds and experiences. A knock at the door interrupted Jack's thoughts. His best man, his college roommate Michael, now a respected professor, stepped in looking slightly flustered. "Everything okay?" Jack asked, immediately noting his friend's expression. "Yes, absolutely," Michael assured him quickly. "Just a minor issue with the flower arrangements on the beach. The wind keeps blowing them over, but the resort staff is handling it." Jack nodded, unsurprised by the small hiccup. When you plan an outdoor wedding, especially on a beach, nature inevitably has her say in the proceedings. "And Ellie? How is she doing?" Michael smiled. "Calm as can be. I've never seen a more relaxed bride. She's in her suite with her friends, going over some photographs she took this morning. Something about the light being perfect. That sounded exactly like Ellie, finding beauty to capture even on her wedding day." Jack checked his watch, noting that they had just under an hour before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. "The guests are all here?" he asked, running through the mental checklist he couldn't help creating even for his own wedding. "Everyone except your parents, but they just texted that their car is 5 minutes away," Michael confirmed. "The resort manager is escorting them directly to the beach when they arrive." Jack nodded, satisfaction settling over him. Despite the abbreviated planning timeline, everything was coming together perfectly. He moved to the balcony of his suite, looking out over the resort grounds to the beach beyond, where white chairs were arranged in a semicircle facing the ocean. A simple wooden arch, decorated with local flowers and greenery, marked the spot where he and Ellie would exchange their vows. It was fitting, he thought, to return to this place, to transform the site of a chance encounter into the setting for a deliberate, joy-filled commitment. The symmetry appealed to both his logical mind and his newly awakened romantic heart. "Time to head down," Sarah announced from behind him. "Your parents just arrived, and the coordinator wants you in position 15 minutes before Ellie walks down the aisle." Jack turned from the view, a sense of calm certainty filling him. "Let's go." The beach was even more beautiful up close, the late afternoon sun casting a golden glow over the sand, the gentle sound of waves creating a natural soundtrack for the occasion. Jack took his place under the arch, Michael beside him, and watched as their small gathering of guests were seated. His parents sat in the front row, his mother already dabbing at her eyes though the ceremony hadn't even begun. Beside them was an empty seat reserved for Ellie's cousin from Seattle, her only living relative. The rest of the chairs were filled with an eclectic mix of people who had become important in their joint life. Friends from Jack's technology world and Ellie's photography circle, key members of the Rising Tides Foundation team, even the gallery owner who had first displayed Ellie's Pacific Island photographs. A small string quartet began to play, and the guests turned to watch as Ellie's 3 closest friends walked down the aisle, each carrying a simple bouquet of local flowers. And then, the music changed to a gentle melody that Jack and Ellie had chosen together, and everyone rose to their feet as Ellie appeared at the end of the aisle. Jack's breath caught at the sight of her. Ellie wore a simple white dress that flowed around her like sea foam, her dark hair adorned with a crown of small white flowers. She carried no bouquet, her hands free as she walked toward him with a smile that outshone the setting sun. As she reached him, taking his outstretched hands, Jack felt a sense of rightness that transcended words. This was where they were meant to be, not just at this resort, not just on this beach, but together, facing whatever life brought their way with the same strength and grace that had carried them through the past year. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, their vows written by themselves rather than borrowed from tradition. Jack spoke of finding light in darkness, of doors opening when he least expected them, of building a partnership based on mutual respect and shared purpose. Ellie spoke of second chances, of honoring the past while embracing the future, of finding love when she had believed it might never come again. It is not by chance that we stand here today, the officiant said as they prepared to exchange rings, but by choice. A choice to see in each other not just what is, but what could be. A choice to build something together that neither could create alone. As Jack slipped the simple platinum band onto Ellie's finger, a perfect match to her engagement ring, and felt her do the same with his, he was struck by the journey that had brought them to this moment. From accidental meeting to deliberate union, from separate paths to a shared one. By the power vested in me, the officiant concluded, and with great joy, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Their kiss was both tender and profound, a promise and a celebration, witnessed by those who had supported their relationship from its beginning. As they turned to face their cheering guests, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink reminiscent of their first morning walk on this same beach. The reception that followed was as intimate and meaningful as the ceremony, dinner at tables set up on a terrace overlooking the ocean, speeches that alternated between moving and humorous, dancing under strings of lights as the stars appeared overhead. During a quiet moment, as they stood together at the edge of the terrace looking out at the moonlit water, Ellie leaned her head against Jack's shoulder. Do you believe in fate? She asked softly. Jack considered the question, his arm around her waist. I used to think everything was a result of decisions and actions, that we created our own paths through pure determination and choice. And now? Ellie prompted when he paused. Now I think perhaps there's a pattern we can't always see. Routes that intersect in ways we could never plan. Jack turned to look at her, the woman who was now his wife. How else could a wrong room number have led to all of this? Ellie smiled, reaching up to touch his face gently. Whatever it was, fate, chance, cosmic intervention, I'm grateful every day for that mix-up with the key cards. Speaking of that night, Jack said, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. There's something I've been meaning to ask you. What were you thinking when I first opened that door? Before either of us spoke. Ellie's eyes softened with the memory. Honestly, my first thought was that you looked lost. Not just because you were in the wrong room but in a deeper way. Like someone who had been traveling for a very long time without a true destination. The perception of it, how clearly she had seen him even in that first startled moment, touched Jack deeply. You weren't wrong, he admitted. I was lost in many ways. Until I found you. Before Ellie could respond, they were interrupted by the resort's event coordinator, apologetically informing them that it was time for the cake cutting. Jack offered Ellie his arm with a smile, and they returned to their guests for the traditional moment. The cake was simple but elegant, decorated with sugar flowers that matched those in Ellie's hair. As they cut it together, Jack was struck by how many wedding traditions they had skipped or modified. No elaborate bridal party, no grand entrance, no bouquet toss. Instead, they had created a celebration that reflected who they were, both as individuals and as a couple. Later, as the reception wound down and guests began to drift away to their rooms or to enjoy the resort's evening amenities, Jack and Ellie found themselves alone for a moment at what had been the head table. Mrs. Wilson, Jack said softly, testing the sound of it. Ellie smiled. Actually, I was thinking of Parker Wilson professionally for my photography. But in private moments like this, just being your wife feels exactly right. And how does it feel? Being married? Jack asked, genuinely curious about her perspective on this new chapter they had begun. Ellie considered the question, her expression thoughtful. It feels like coming home after a long journey. Familiar and new at the same time. Safe but also exciting. She turned her hand, watching as her rings caught the light. What about for you? It feels like walking through the right door finally, Jack replied, the metaphor making Ellie laugh softly. Like everything before was preparation for this, for us, for the life we're building together. As the last of their guests bid them good night, Jack and Ellie decided to take a walk on the beach. The same beach where they had first truly connected, where they had watched sunrises together, where they had begun to fall in love almost a year earlier. The night was warm, the sky clear and filled with stars, the only sound the gentle rhythm of waves meeting shore. They walked barefoot, shoes in hand, feeling the cool sand between their toes. 1 week from now we'll be in Bangladesh, Ellie said after a comfortable silence. Starting the first segment of the documentary. And launching the Rising Tides educational initiative in local schools there, Jack added. Combining our honeymoon with foundation work and your National Geographic project. Not exactly a conventional start to married life. Ellie laughed. We've never been conventional, have we? From day one we've been writing our own story. And what a story it is, Jack agreed, stopping to pull her close. The billionaire CEO and the award-winning photographer, joining forces to save island communities while accidentally falling in love. Don't forget the wrong room, Ellie added, her eyes twinkling in the moonlight. That's the best part of the story. No, Jack said softly, looking at her with all the love he felt. You're the best part of the story, Ellie. You always will be. As they stood there on the moonlit beach, the waves gently washing away their footprints in the sand, Jack Wilson knew with absolute certainty that he had found something more valuable than all his business success, more meaningful than any technology he had ever developed. A partnership that would withstand whatever challenges lay ahead, a love that had begun with a mistaken door but had become the most right thing in his world. And as their lips met in a kiss that held both promise and fulfillment, the story of the wrong room that led to exactly the right life continued, not ending but evolving, growing, flourishing, just beginning its most beautiful chapter yet.